Good morning, Digit fam. Adam Dowd here, back to bring you all the latest tech tidbits. I asked Sam to step in for me for a couple of days because I had to jog on downtown and test some of the 5Gs, and yes, it was much better this time. Not great, but better. You'll hear more about that in a few days once I've had time to, gather my thoughts. Also, I needed to remind all of you that Sam still exists, and now that proof of life has been established, we can get down to business. It is May 23rd, 2019, and this is your Digit Daily. Do you remember Google Duplex? No, not that boring form autofill thing that Google showed off this year. I mean that super slick AI calling restaurants for you to make reservations thing. I've talked about it on this podcast before. Basically, the way it works is you tell Google you want a reservation for 2 at Applebee's because, brother, you really know how to show a girl a good time. So Google will call the restaurant and make the reservation for you and then ping you back 15 minutes later and be all like, yeah, I did that for you. She's going to be super impressed. And you're like, excellent. Well, the really cool thing here is that Google is doing this entirely with the power of AI and computer-generated algorithms that sound 100% real. Except it's totally not doing that. You see, if you were to believe Sundar Pichai on stage last year, which for the record, I totally did, then this process from start to finish was getting done on a server somewhere automagically. But let that be a lesson to you kids. CEOs only have to tell the truth when they're talking to investors. Because it turns out that this isn't as AI-driven or automagical as originally advertised. It's heavily supervised by humans who are not afraid to take the wheel. But where's all this coming from? Well, the New York Times ran several tests using Google Duplex to book reservations. The Times tested Duplex over the course of several days, calling more than a dozen restaurants. Google later confirmed that it takes a very conservative approach to these things. They don't want to go all pissing off restaurant hosts around the country with half-baked AI that isn't bulletproof. According to Google, 25% of calls from Google Duplex start with a human, and of the remaining calls, about 15% of those require some kind of human intervention. But honestly, those are some solid numbers. That's like in the neighborhood of 60% automated or so, and that's impressive. But that's the thing. Google kind of implied that this was 100% AI, but it's really only 60%, which is, less than 100. If you start with 100 and go down to 60, that's disappointing. But if you start with 0 and go up to 60, that's pretty awesome. So just be straight with people on stage. We'll understand. We get it. And it's still cool as hell. I mean, at the end of the day, when you really stop and think about it, this all makes total sense. Google needs data, and it needs to try out this new thing. But it just can't release a T1000 on the world and pray that it works. There will need to be humans involved, and occasionally, they're going to have to take the wheel. But Google approached this from a never mind the man behind the curtain perspective, which just never ends well. Tristan on the newsletter says, use the trust but verify rule, which is a good philosophy, or as I once heard Kara Swisher say on a podcast, there's an expression in journalism, if your mother says she loves you, check it. And I can't say I totally disagree with that. At the very least, find a second source. And with that, we're going to head on over into the Roundup! C. Scott Brown over at Android Authority takes a look at how Huawei bans might not just affect Huawei, but all of Google in general. After all, if the second largest phone maker in the world starts touting its own operating system, that could have a pretty significant impact on Android in general. Not that I think OEMs would flock to a new Huawei OS, but it could happen. Though I think it's far more likely that this is just a bargaining chip, and things will return to normal far before that August 19th deadline. CNET takes a look at Apple's WWDC invitation artwork and tries to guess at what Apple might have to offer on June 3rd. They're thinking new Macintosh Pro, possible breakup of iTunes into smaller services, maybe even the unification of macOS and iOS into one operating system. If you ask me, it's really just a bunch of drawings. I've never really been very good at this stuff. One thing I am, though, is patient, so I'll just wait to see what Tim has to say in a couple of weeks. AT&T has an idea. It wants to sell hyper-targeted advertising for its customers. Like if you and your neighbor are watching the same TV show on live TV, your neighbor might get an ad for Buenos Aires while you might get an ad for a new Prius that you've been eyeing. I'm just kidding. Nobody eyes a Prius. But the rest of that is totally true, and frankly a little scary. AT&T owns the network. They're a carrier, but they also own the content, Time Warner, HBO, but they also own the delivery system, DirecTV. This is all very, very possible, and not the reason I cut the cord, but it is a reason why I'm glad I did. An Amazon customer tried to return a package. Okay, that's normal. An Amazon customer tried to return the package directly to Jeff Bezos. Okay, that's a little weird. An Amazon customer tried to return a package directly to Jeff Bezos in person at an annual shareholders meeting. Well, now that one gets high marks for creativity. But this all actually happened, and the win goes to Bezos, who said to the customer, quote, "My apologies that you had to use this unusual venue to accomplish what should have been a routine task. Anyone else have anything they need to return?" And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a killer salesman. Mario Kart Tour is coming to Android very soon. Right now the game is in a closed beta, and unfortunately, I haven't been accepted yet. Anyway, Android Authority has a look at the new game and how it works and how much you'll spend on in-app purchases because, yes sir, you betcha, there will be in-app purchases. And finally, New York City has a new supervillain to deal with. This person does not take over TV airwaves or release poison gas into the streets. Rather, this evildoer messes with trains in the New York subway system. He rides on the backs of them, he disengages safety chains, he pulls emergency brakes, and I have to be honest, it's a little funny. But also, as a former commuter, I get how this can make life hell for thousands of people who have my sympathy. Just a suggestion, New York commuters, during that next delay, may I suggest a Digit Daily to pass the time. So that is going to do it for today's Digit Daily. If you'd like to learn more about any of these stories, check out the links in the show notes and subscribe to our daily newsletter on Digit.com. And if you like what you heard, subscribe, leave a review, and don't forget to tell your friends about DigitDailyPod.com. Once again, I'm Adam Dowd, Dead Technology on Twitter, and we'll talk again tomorrow.